My name is Hannah Mercer, and at 37 years old, I learned that the word pathetic could echo for years if it came from the right person. The day I was promoted to lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, my father laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, at least not in a way anyone else would notice. He just looked at the invitation in his hand, shook his head, and said, "All those years for a desk job and a fancy title. Pathetic." My mother didn't argue. My younger brother smirked, and neither of them came to the ceremony. 6 months later, federal agents showed up at my parents' front door looking for someone else entirely. By the end of that week, my father was begging me for help, and what I did next changed everything. Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever spent years trying to earn approval from people who had already decided not to give it, settle in. This story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when integrity becomes more valuable than family loyalty. And if you've ever been the responsible one in your family, the one who carries everyone else's expectations while receiving none of their support, comment steady below. You'll understand this one. The promotion ceremony itself wasn't impressive. Army ceremonies rarely are. Most happen in rooms with bad lighting, folding chairs, and coffee that's somehow both burnt and weak at the same time. But that day mattered to me. Not because of the rank, not even because of the achievement. It mattered because I had spent 14 years working toward it. 14 years of deployments, training exercises, missed holidays, night classes, weekends spent studying procurement regulations while everyone else was relaxing. 14 years of proving I belonged. The silver oak leaf waiting in the presentation box represented every sacrifice. And despite everything, I still reserved 3 seats. One for my father, one for my mother, one for my brother. The seats stayed empty the entire ceremony. I tried not to look at them. But it's strange how the things you're trying hardest not to notice become the only things you can see. My commanding officer gave a speech. My colleagues applauded. Someone took photographs. I smiled when appropriate, answered questions, accepted congratulations, but every time my eyes drifted toward the front row, those 3 empty chairs sat there like witnesses. Eventually, Captain Reynolds pinned the rank on my uniform because there was nobody else to do it. Afterward, she squeezed my shoulder. "You earned this." I thanked her, and I meant it. The problem wasn't that nobody appreciated my achievement. The problem was that the people whose approval I'd spent my entire life chasing still didn't. There is a difference. A painful one. The call had happened a week earlier. I still remember exactly where I was standing. My kitchen. Tuesday evening. Rain tapping against the window. I had rehearsed the invitation 3 separate times before dialing. Not because I was nervous, because experience had taught me preparation was safer than hope. My mother answered. That was usually how it worked. My father disliked phone calls unless they benefited him directly. I explained the ceremony, the date, the time, the visitor requirements, the nearby hotel I was willing to reserve. Everything. There was a pause. Then muffled voices. Then my father took the phone. "Hannah." His tone already sounded irritated. "I wanted to invite you." I heard. Another pause. Then, "We're not driving 6 hours for some pathetic promotion ceremony." Just like that. Pathetic. Not small. Not unnecessary. Pathetic. Words matter. Especially when they come from people who know exactly where to place the knife. I remember staring at the rain outside my window, watching drops slide down the glass, trying to decide whether I felt angry, hurt, disappointed. Mostly I felt tired, because it wasn't new. That's the thing people don't always understand about family disappointment. The first time hurts, the 100th time becomes predictable, and predictable pain creates a different kind of wound, one that settles deeper. "I understand," I said. Then I ended the call. Not because I was mature, because there was nothing left to say. My father believed there were 2 kinds of military careers. Real ones. And everything else. He had spent 24 years as an enlisted soldier, retired proudly, worked hard, sacrificed plenty. I respected that, still do, but somewhere along the way, he developed a very specific definition of what counted as meaningful service. Combat arms, field operations, direct action. Anything else was paperwork, administration, management, not real army. Unfortunately for me, my career had moved into acquisition and oversight, defense procurement, contract management, compliance, the systems that make military operations possible. Important work, necessary work, the kind of work nobody notices until it fails. My father called it office soldiering. My brother called it government babysitting. My mother called it complicated. Nobody called it valuable. Except the army. The army seemed to think it was valuable, which, looking back, should have mattered more than it did. But children spend years believing parental approval is oxygen, even when they're adults, even when they know better, even when they should know better. My brother Ethan never had that problem. Ethan was the success story, the favorite, the golden child, 3 years younger than me, charismatic, confident, naturally gifted at making people like him, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with business cards, dinner invitations, and job offers. My father loved that about him. Ethan worked for a private defense subcontractor, good salary, nice house, luxury truck, expensive vacations, designer watches. Everything looked impressive, and my father loved impressive. At family gatherings, conversations somehow always returned to Ethan's latest success. A new contract, a bigger bonus, another promotion. Meanwhile, my career achievements passed through the room like weather reports, acknowledged, forgotten, dismissed. I told myself it didn't bother me, mostly because admitting it did felt childish. But there were moments, small moments, the kind that linger, like Thanksgiving 2 years earlier, when Ethan announced he was buying a vacation property. My father nearly stood up to toast him. 3 weeks later, I received a commendation from the Department of Defense. Nobody mentioned it. Not once. The imbalance became normal. And normal things are dangerous because eventually you stop questioning them. You start accepting them. Still, something about Ethan had begun bothering me. Not morally. Not specifically. Just mathematically. The numbers didn't add up. His lifestyle had accelerated. Rapidly. The house got bigger. The vehicles got newer. The vacations got longer. The spending became louder. A subcontractor executive can earn excellent money, but Ethan seemed to be spending extraordinary money. I noticed, then ignored it. Because questioning family finances is an excellent way to create drama, and because Ethan had a talent for turning simple questions into accusations. Ask where something came from. Suddenly you're jealous. Ask how a deal happened. Suddenly you're judgmental. So I learned not to ask. Instead, I filed observations away. Quietly. The way soldiers learn to do. I didn't know it yet. But those observations would matter. More than anyone could imagine. Including Ethan. Including me. And especially my father. Because within 6 months, a photograph would appear in a newspaper. Federal investigators would start asking questions. My family would suddenly decide my career wasn't pathetic anymore, and the daughter they ignored would become the only person they thought could save them. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. And neither did I. The photograph appeared on a Thursday. I didn't even know it existed until my phone started vibrating across my desk. At first I ignored it. Most military offices develop an unspoken rule about personal phones. If it's important, they'll call twice. If it's truly important, they'll keep calling. By the fourth call from my mother before lunch, I knew something unusual was happening. My mother rarely called once. 4 times before noon felt like an emergency. I stepped into an empty conference room and answered, "Mom? Oh, thank goodness." Her voice sounded strangely excited. Not worried. Not upset. Excited, which somehow made me more cautious. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Whenever someone starts a conversation that way, something is absolutely wrong. "We just wanted to check on you." I frowned. My mother had not called to check on me in months, okay. There was a brief silence, then she said it. "We saw the article." The article. I had no idea what she meant. "What article?" "The newspaper article." Another pause. "The one with the photograph." Suddenly I remembered, earlier that week, I'd attended a procurement conference near Washington, nothing extraordinary. Several senior military officials, various civilian agencies, contract oversight representatives. Hours of presentations most people would find painfully boring. Apparently, a regional reporter covering local military personnel had included a photograph. A photograph I hadn't even seen. "What photograph?" "The one where you're walking with those men." Now I was genuinely confused. "What men?" "The federal agents." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. The men weren't federal agents assigned to me. They weren't assigned to anyone. They were security personnel working the event. We had simply happened to exit the same hallway at roughly the same moment. A photographer captured it. A newspaper printed it. And now my hometown had apparently invented an entire story around it. "Mom," I rubbed my forehead. "They aren't my agents." "That's not what the article says. The article doesn't say that. It says they were accompanying you. Because we were walking in the same direction." Another silence. The kind that happens when someone hears your explanation but prefers the more interesting version. Then my mother asked a question. One simple question. One question that changed everything. "So, what exactly do you do now?" I sat very still, because my mother had never asked that. Not once. Not in 14 years. Not when I deployed. Not when I promoted. Not when I changed assignments. Not ever. And suddenly she wanted details. That was when my instincts woke up, the same instincts that military service sharpens over time. The ability to recognize when a conversation isn't really about what it's pretending to be about. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason." There was a slight hesitation. Too slight for most people to notice. Not too slight for me. "No reason. We just realize we don't know much about your work." That part was true. They didn't. Because they had never cared enough to ask. Something changed after that phone call. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But noticeably. My father started texting. That alone felt unnatural. My father considered text messages a nuisance, yet suddenly I was receiving messages every few days. "Morning, kiddo. Hope work's going well. Saw something on the news about defense spending. Made me think of you." The messages weren't offensive. They weren't manipulative. Not obviously. That almost made them stranger, because affection from my father usually arrived with conditions attached. Yet now it seemed to arrive freely, at least on the surface. A week later Ethan called. Another rarity. We exchanged small talk, talked about weather, work, family. Then he casually asked, "So what level are you at now?" "What do you mean?" "Like, how high up are you?" I laughed. "Not nearly as high as people seem to think, but you know people." It wasn't a question. Just a statement. A carefully placed statement. I remembered the photograph. The newspaper. My mother's sudden curiosity, and for the first time, a small cold feeling settled somewhere in my chest. The kind of feeling that doesn't arrive with evidence. Only instinct. Sometimes instinct is wrong. Sometimes it's the first clue. The family reunion invitation arrived 2 weeks later. My mother called. Her voice bright, almost cheerful. "We should all get together." I nearly dropped the phone. My family didn't organize reunions. We tolerated holidays. We survived birthdays. We endured Thanksgiving. But voluntary family gatherings, those were unusual. When? Saturday. This Saturday? Yes. I checked my calendar. Nothing urgent, no reason not to go. Yet something felt off. What's the occasion? No occasion. The answer came too quickly. Just a fraction too quickly. We just miss you. I stared out my office window. Miss me? Interesting. Nobody had missed me at my promotion ceremony. Nobody had missed me when I spent Christmas overseas. Nobody had missed me for most of the previous decade. And now suddenly everyone missed me. The timing felt suspicious. Still, curiosity won. I'll come. Wonderful. The relief in her voice was immediate, almost excessive, and that relief bothered me more than anything else she'd said. That Friday afternoon something happened at work. Something small. Something routine. Something I nearly ignored. I was reviewing procurement documentation. Not unusual. Most of my days involved paperwork, contracts, compliance reviews, risk assessments, the machinery behind military spending. Names passed through my desk constantly. Companies, subcontractors, vendors, thousands of them. Most meant nothing. One name meant something. I saw it, paused, then looked again, because I recognized it. A large defense contractor. One of the biggest. The same company Ethan's firm regularly worked with. I knew because he'd mentioned it repeatedly, bragged about it honestly. The file itself wasn't mine. The contents weren't mine to review. I couldn't access the investigation section attached to it, nor did I try. But the notation existed, visible enough data and active matter, under review. Additional oversight required. That's all. Nothing dramatic. Nothing conclusive. Yet the timing felt uncomfortable. The sudden family interest. The newspaper photograph. The contractor. The upcoming family meeting. For the first time, separate puzzle pieces started drifting toward each other. Not connecting. Not yet. Just moving closer. Enough to make me pay attention. Enough to make me careful. That evening I sat alone in my apartment, rain tapping softly against the windows, the same weather I'd had the night my father called my promotion pathetic. Funny how life does that. Reuses settings, changes meanings. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and thought. People often imagine critical decisions happen dramatically, like movie scenes, like revelations. The truth is usually quieter. The truth often looks like a woman sitting alone with a cup of tea and an uncomfortable feeling she can't explain. I wasn't investigating anything. I wasn't accusing anyone. I wasn't even particularly worried. I was simply noticing. And years of military service had taught me something important. When multiple unusual events begin happening at the same time, pay attention, even if you don't yet know why. Especially then. By midnight I had reached one conclusion. If my family wanted something, I would find out soon enough. And if they didn't, then a family dinner would simply be a family dinner. And no harm done. Still, before bed, I did something I rarely do. I called a legal ethics officer I trusted. Not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, because I wanted clarity. Hypothetically, always hypothetically. What happens if family members ask questions about work related to a matter connected to them? The officer didn't hesitate. Answer nothing, even generally, especially generally. What if they ask for help? Another pause, then, document it. That answer lingered. Document it. Not stop it. Not argue. Not negotiate. Document it. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the dark ceiling for a long time afterward, because suddenly the cold feeling in my chest wasn't getting smaller. It was getting sharper. The family gathering was less than 24 hours away, and for reasons I couldn't fully explain yet, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be about family at all. The next morning, my father greeted me at the door with a hug, and that was when I knew something was very wrong. My father greeted me at the door with a hug. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd walked into the wrong house, not because my father was an unkind man. He wasn't, but affection had always been rationed in our family, carefully measured, distributed according to achievement, usefulness, and timing, and my father hadn't hugged me first in years, maybe a decade. Yet here he was smiling broadly, hand on my shoulder, asking about my drive, telling me how good it was to see me. The performance wasn't bad. That's what made it unsettling. If he'd been obviously fake, I could have dismissed it. Instead, he seemed almost convincing, almost. My mother appeared from the kitchen carrying coffee. My favorite roast, a roast she hadn't bought in years. Ethan stood from the dining table and actually pulled out a chair for me, again. Not impossible behavior. Just unusual enough to trigger alarms. People reveal themselves through patterns. And my family's pattern had changed overnight. That meant something. I just didn't know what yet. Lunch was already waiting. Homemade food. Fresh pie. The kind of meal usually reserved for holidays. My mother kept refilling my plate. My father kept asking questions. Not about my life, about my work. Subtle questions. Careful questions. Questions designed to sound casual. How many people worked in my office? What exactly did oversight involve? How much authority did I have? Did I work directly with investigators? Did I know people in Washington? The questions came one at a time, like someone testing ice before stepping onto a frozen lake. I answered carefully, truthfully, but vaguely. Years in uniform teach you how to speak without revealing anything important. Eventually, Ethan joined in. So you know a lot of people then? Some. The right people? I looked at him. He smiled, the same easy smile he'd always had. The one that made strangers trust him. The one that never quite reached his eyes. Depends what you mean by right. He laughed. Changed the subject. But the question stayed in the room. Lingering. Waiting. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, you know this feeling. The moment when everyone is being unusually nice. Not because they suddenly appreciate you. Because they're building towards something. You can feel it. Like pressure before a storm. You don't know exactly what's coming. You just know the weather is changing. Comment below if you've ever experienced that feeling, because what happened next confirmed everything my instincts had been trying to tell me. After lunch, my nephew went outside to play basketball. My mother started clearing dishes. My father closed the dining room door. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Then he sat back down. And the room changed. The warmth disappeared. Not completely. Just enough. Enough for the mask to slip. My father folded his hands. Ethan stopped smiling. My mother suddenly became fascinated with her coffee cup. And I knew. Finally. We had arrived at the reason for the invitation. Hannah, my father said, we need your help. There it was. Simple. Direct. Honest at last. I sat quietly. Waiting. Ethan spoke first. There's been some misunderstanding at work. A misunderstanding. Interesting word. People rarely use that word when things are going well. What kind of misunderstanding? Ethan looked toward our father. My father nodded. Permission granted. Then Ethan continued. Some contracts are being reviewed. I felt my stomach tighten. Only slightly. Just enough. Reviewed how? Federal review. There it was. The missing piece. Not the whole picture. But enough. A few seconds passed. Nobody spoke. Then my father leaned forward. Hannah, you've worked hard. I almost smiled. That was the first genuinely positive thing he'd said about my career in years. Funny timing. You know important people now. There it was. Closer. Closer. Almost there. I remained silent. letting him continue. We're family. My father swallowed. We take care of each other. And suddenly I knew exactly where this was heading, every inch of it. The newspaper photograph. The sudden affection. The phone calls. The reunion. The questions. Everything. They believed I could influence something. And they wanted access. Not to me. To what they thought I represented. Power. Tell me exactly what you're asking. The room became very quiet, because suddenly nobody wanted to say it plainly. Funny how that works. People become vague when the truth sounds ugly. Ethan rubbed his palms together. We just thought maybe you could make some calls. There it was. My father immediately jumped in. Nothing improper. Which is exactly what people say before proposing something improper. Just ask questions. My mother finally spoke. Help us understand what's happening. The three of them looked at me, waiting, watching, expecting. And I felt something surprising. Not anger. Relief. Because uncertainty had finally ended. The mystery was over. Now I knew. Now everything made sense. I set down my coffee. Slowly. Carefully. Then I asked the most important question. Ethan. His eyes met mine. Did you do something wrong? The room froze. Not dramatically. Not visibly. Just enough. A heartbeat. Maybe two. Then Ethan looked away. And that was answer enough. Not proof. Not evidence. But enough. Because innocent people usually answer immediately. They don't search the room first. They don't check reactions. They don't calculate. They answer. Ethan calculated. My father noticed and immediately stepped in. That's not the point. Yes. I thought. It absolutely is. What followed wasn't an argument. Not yet. It was persuasion. Years of it. Compressed into one afternoon. My father talked about loyalty. My mother talked about family. Ethan talked about misunderstandings. All three used different words. All three wanted the same thing. They wanted me to use my position. To help. Influence. Interfere. And every minute they talked, the request became clearer, until eventually nobody bothered pretending anymore. My father leaned forward. You know people. Yes. You understand how these things work. Somewhat. So make a call. There it was. Finally. Fully exposed. No disguises left. No ambiguity. No misunderstanding. Just the truth. Make a call. I looked around the room. My father. My mother. Ethan. And for the first time in my life, something clicked into place. A realization. Simple. Painful. Permanent. They hadn't suddenly become proud of me. They hadn't suddenly respected my career. They hadn't changed their minds about anything. The promotion was still pathetic. The work was still paperwork. The army was still beneath Ethan's business success. The only difference was usefulness. They thought I was useful now. That's all. And somehow that hurt more than the years of criticism, because criticism at least acknowledges you exist. This reduced me to a tool. I stood. Not dramatically, just calmly. The room watched. Waiting. My father looked confident. Ethan looked hopeful. My mother looked nervous. Then I said something none of them expected. I need some time. Relief flooded the room immediately. They thought hesitation meant possibility. They thought consideration meant negotiation. They thought I was struggling with the decision. I wasn't. Not even a little. Because the decision had already been made. The moment they asked, the only thing left was procedure, documentation, disclosure, the right steps in the right order. My entire career had trained me for moments exactly like this. Moments when integrity becomes inconvenient. Moments when character costs something. Moments when nobody is watching except yourself. My father smiled. Knew you'd come through. I didn't correct him. Not yet. My mother squeezed my hand. Thank you, honey. I didn't correct her either. Not yet. Ethan looked relieved enough to breathe normally again, and for a brief second I almost felt sorry for him, because he genuinely believed I was considering it. He genuinely believed family loyalty would outweigh everything else. He genuinely believed I could be pressured into becoming the solution to his problem. He was wrong, but he didn't know it yet. That evening I drove home alone, sun setting behind the highway, radio off, thoughts loud. The further I got from my parents' house, the clearer everything became. My father hadn't asked me to save Ethan. Not really. He'd asked me to betray myself. The request just happened to involve Ethan. And that distinction mattered. Because people who love you don't ask you to destroy your future for their comfort. They don't ask you to risk your career, your integrity, your freedom. People who love you protect those things, they don't spend them. Monday morning I arrived at work early, earlier than usual. The building was nearly empty. The hallways quiet, coffee machines humming. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began writing. Not a complaint, not an accusation, a disclosure. Professional, factual, complete, every relevant detail. Every required step, every proper channel. No emotions. No opinions. Just facts. Then I submitted it, and with a single click, every door my family thought existed slammed permanently shut. I formally recused myself, reported the contact, documented the request, removed myself entirely. By the time I stood from my desk, there was no favor left to give. No influence left to offer. No leverage left to spend. The decision was over. The paperwork simply hadn't caught up yet. 3 days later my mother called, her voice brighter than I'd heard in years. Your father wants to thank you. I stared out my office window. Thank me. Interesting. They still believed I was helping. They still thought the plan was working. We're having another family dinner Saturday. I closed my eyes, slowly, because I finally understood exactly what was about to happen. They were preparing a celebration. And I was bringing the truth. The collision between those two things was going to be unforgettable. I'll be there. Wonderful. She sounded genuinely happy, which somehow made me sad, because by this time next week, everything would be different. For all of us. And none of them saw it coming. Not my father. Not Ethan. Not even my mother. But federal agents already knew something my family didn't. And on Saturday, they were about to learn it too. The hard way. The dinner where they expected gratitude would become the day I stopped asking for their approval forever. And once I said what needed to be said, there would be no going back.